Hey, what's going on, guys? OJ back here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about UFC crowds and we're going to be ranking them based on nationality. Now, keep in mind, I'm not going to be talking about any of the obscure crowds or fan bases, all right? These crowds we will typically see at least once a year because the UFC, although it's a global company, caters to certain fan bases over others. And also, I've included a couple of state flags, US state flags to be specific, because I don't know, there's just not that many countries that the UFC really visits frequently. But I do know a couple of states that the UFC love to visit at certain points of the year. So I'm gonna have a set of tiers for you guys on the screen in a couple of seconds. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. All right, we're gonna first start off with the Mexican fans because this is UFC Noche this week, all right? I'm gonna put the Mexican crowd specifically at B tier, all right? They haven't really had that much success to be excited for, so fair enough. But yeah, I don't really feel one way particularly strong about the Mexican crowd. Like, I don't think they're a bad crowd, but I haven't really been moved by them, all right? Like, you'll notice throughout the video, there are a couple of like fan bases where like they make the arena electric, right? And those fans make me want to say, "Oh, we should go there more often." All right. I don't have any strong feelings towards the Mexican fans and crowd, so I'm just gonna put them at B tier for now. All right, and we're gonna move on. Up next, we got the Las Vegas fans. I'm gonna put them at the party poopers, and the reason I say this is, although Las Vegas is the most frequent place that the UFC visits, all right, I feel that most people in Las Vegas are just rich people, rich casuals to be specific, who don't really know much about the sport. They don't really show up for the early prelims. They're kind of just there for the main card and the vibes. They're just kind of there because their influencer friends are there. It just doesn't feel like a genuine fan. All right, like you'll get those, but more often or not, you're probably gonna get some random influencer who got paid to show up there, or you're gonna get someone who's just happened to be in the area who wants to spend some money and be like, "Oh, I guess I spent $3,000 on like decent tickets." I don't know how the UFC pricing tickets work right now, but like I know it's very expensive. But yeah, Las Vegas crowd overall, I feel that a lot of them are just casuals. They don't really appreciate like the sport that much compared to like other fan bases. And Las Vegas fans overall, yeah, I don't know. Like it could be a lot better if y'all actually showed up for the early prelims and stuff. All right, now up next, we got the Florida fans. I'm gonna put the Florida fans in the I'm gonna put them at A tier. All right, the Florida fans are actually hype. All right, the Florida fans actually do a good job of hyping their fighters up, and even fighters who may not be from Florida, but just like fighters who frequently fight in Florida, like for example Gilbert Burns. He's been someone who's been frequently fighting at Florida, and they actually appreciate those types of fighters. So overall, I think that Florida, it's a great crowd, right? The UFC, they usually go there sometime around like April or May ish, and I can appreciate that because I don't know, the Florida crowd. You know, if every U.S. crowd was like the Florida crowd, then I wouldn't mind it whatsoever because they're actually pretty hype. All right, now up next, we got the New York crowd. I'm gonna put the New York crowd. Hmm. I'm gonna put them at I'm gonna put that at B tier. Yeah. Sometimes the New York crowd can be great, but at other times the New York crowd can be more like the Las Vegas crowd. All right. It Unlike the Mexican crowd, which I don't have a strong feeling for, the New York crowd, its highs are great, like the Florida crowd, but its lows are kind of like the party poopers, like the Las Vegas crowd. So that's just my take on the New York crowd. If you average it out, it's somewhere in the B tier, but they can be fun at times. It's just sometimes they're also party poopers. All right, now up next we got the Saudi Arabia fans. I'm gonna put them at party poopers. All right. Now I will say this. Saudi Arabia, the UFC just started to kind of heavily invest in that market, but so far from what I've seen, the Saudi Arabia fans, they're not the most energetic. They don't really get hyped whenever like a crazy highlight reel KO happens, unless the fighter happens to be Muslim. All right, if a foreign fighter gets a vicious knockout or like a crazy submission, God forbid you cheer for them. All right, I don't know. That's just me. And also, the Saudi Arabia fans, I feel that it's kind of hard for them to appreciate like high level cards, right? Because that it's kind of similar to Abu Dhabi, all right? I could definitely see Saudi Arabia fans improving once the UFC starts going there more and more often. But so far, over the last 2 years or so that they've heavily invested in that market, I haven't been too wowed by the Saudi Arabia crowd, and yeah, most of them I feel that I don't know, they're just kind of there for no apparent reason. All right, now up next, we got the Chinese crowd. I'm gonna put the Chinese crowd at the A tier. What I really like about the Chinese crowd is if you try to speak Chinese as a foreigner, like they'll still cheer for you. And even when their fighter loses, all right, they're hyped as long it was a crazy finish. Like the Charles Johnson fight with Loner Kavanaugh, where Charles Johnson knocked out Kavanaugh in the second round. All right, Johnson started to try to speak Chinese to the crowd, and they were all for it. So I really appreciate that from the Chinese crowd. It's like little things like that that really make the difference between like a B tier crowd and a great crowd, in my opinion. So overall, the Chinese crowd, I really like them, and I hope the UFC goes back there more often. All right, now up next we got the UAE crowd. I'm gonna put the UAE crowd, more specifically the Abu Dhabi crowd, at B tier. They have been getting better recently at just, showing more some emotion whenever a crazy finish happens. And I think they have been getting better over the last couple of years. Like I just remember when the UAE crowd first, like whenever the UFC first came over, like a couple of years back, yeah, they were barely responsive at all, and it was kind of frustrating because like a crazy finish would happen, but because the fighter was like black or like someone who's not from the UAE, right? He just had no reaction to it whatsoever. It was kind of a letdown, but recently I do think they have been getting better. Do I think it's because a lot of the Muslim fighters have been finding a lot of success? Yes. However, I also believe that the crowd is just much better as of recently. So the UAE crowd, I can definitely see them being an A tier once they actually really get their action going. But for now, I'm gonna put them at B tier because I don't know, I just can't forget the times where like the UAE crowd they're just like very unresponsive. All right, now up next we got the French crowd, arguably the best crowd the UFC's ever had. All right, the French crowd is absolutely electric. All right, the Paris card that happened on Saturday or the last Saturday, like it was absolutely crazy. All right, BSD gets a finish. The crowd is going wild. All right, and every single fight, even in the early prelims, all right, all the fans are there in the Paris arena. So I really love that from the French fans. And also, they are diehard for their French fighters. All right. Usually, I'm kind of annoyed about the nationality bias and stuff, but in case for the French, I love it. All right. Dude, they get hyped off like a French fighter like throwing a jab and landing it. All right. Even though that can be annoying at times, I don't know, I just feel like they bring an energy that no other crowd really does. So I'm gonna say that the French fans are arguably the best one of the best fan bases in the UFC because they're just gonna cheer. And even if the person who isn't French, right, they beat a French fighter, right? If you get it in impressive fashion, they'll still kind of root for you. Unless you're Brian Battle, who kind of just made enemies with the French crowd. But that's also another thing why I love the French crowd, right? They play with like, the whole storyline and the characters, right? So I really appreciate the French crowd. Like they bring out emotions unlike any other crowd. So that's something to really appreciate about. And hopefully the UFC goes to Paris more often. All right, now up next we got the Brazilian crowd. Yeah, this is arguably the worst crowd in the UFC. Now, when their fighter wins, it's not so bad. But when their fighter loses, and like what their longtime like Hall of Famer, who former champion like Glover Teixeira, when they're retiring, the Brazilian crowd is just leaving. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? All right, like they have so many legends that like when a legend retires because in Brazil, like they're just so unresponsive. All right, if they lose their fight. So I just find it a very trashy crowd. Do I think they've been getting better for the last few years? Yeah, it's hard to say. All right, the only pay per view they had was with Alexander Pantoja, and Pantoja did kind of just win against Steve Erceg, I guess. I don't know. Like it, if I need to see like a Brazilian champion or a former champion retire, like after a loss, and then we'll judge the Brazilian crowd off that once more. But for now, I'm gonna say that the Brazilian crowd, it's arguably the worst crowd in the UFC. All right, now up next we got the Aussie fans, all right? The Aussie fans, I gotta put them at the A tier, all right? They're similar to the Chinese crowd and the Florida crowd. Like, they're very electric. However, the one thing I'm going to criticize heavily on the Australian card is the fact that they consume literal dog shit, right? You can put out absolute garbage for a pay-per-view, and the Aussie fans will just eat that shit up. I don't know why the Aussie fans just don't demand for more pay-per-views that are like actually well built together. Not like Sean Strickland versus Dricus Duplessis 2. All right, that shit was an abomination. And yet, it only happens in Australia. All right, we'll just put it like that. Australian fans, they are diehard MMA fans, but they just consume too much crap and they don't really bother to put their foot down so that the rest of us can enjoy a decent pay per view. All right, now up next we got the English fans. I'm gonna put the English fans also at the S tier. Now they're not nearly as electric as the French crowd, but they are pretty hype. And also the English fans. All right, they came to Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad 2, right? At 4 in the fucking morning, right? Do you know how impressive that is? Right? I'm a diehard fan. I ain't staying up till 4 in the morning for a random pay-per-view, okay? That's just not what I'm gonna do. But a lot of UK fans showed up for UFC 304 and even witnessed Bilal Muhammad kind of decision max against Leon Edwards, all right? And still, the English fans still watched the entire card, all right? They were hyped when Tom Aspinall knocked out Curtis Blades at UFC 304. So, yeah, I can't really give enough props to the English fans, all right? No other fan base is gonna sit through a pay-per-view at 4 in the morning, all right? They're just not. But hats off to them because after they did that once, they stood up against Dana White, all right? It's fair because they already did that once and no other fan base has really done that. The UFC will adjust their time zones to every other country except the English for some reason. But yeah, the English fans, they just did a very good job. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna say that the second best crowd in my opinion. All right, nothing beats the French crowd in my opinion, but the English is pretty close. And last but not least, we got the Canadian crowd. All right, the Canadian fans, I'm gonna put them at the B tier. All right, the Canadian fans, they haven't really got anything to write for. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put them at the A tier, right? All their male fighters are losing, but it's the Canadian fans that are continuously backing up all of their male fighters. All right. If I was Canadian, I would not be supporting most, if not any, of the Canadian male fighters because they just keep losing. They just keep getting fraud checked, and they don't really have success outside of GSP. But most Canadian fans do seem to support their fellow Canadian men, right? Even though they're not really winning any fights. So hats off to the Canadian fans for doing that. And also, they get hyped for the WMMA fights because their WMMA fighters are actually legit. So, if you're supporting WMMA, right, as a crowd, hats off to you. So I think the Canadian fans, they're a great crowd overall, and I rate them higher than most crowds in my opinion. All right, that's going to be it for today's video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about each one of these crowds and fan bases. Again, this is my subjective list. If you want to disagree, feel free to leave a comment down below. But other than that, though, please make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this because I want to quit my part time job and I want to get this channel monetized. So, yeah, with that being said, I will probably see you guys later. Peace.